Hello, my name is Steve Haynes. I spent 10 years working in the music industry, in orchestral, theatre, recording and in education, and recently gave that up to be the London regional official at the Musicians Union. Here at the MU, we represent over 30,000 musicians working in all different aspects of the music industry, and one of those members, Nat Witts, is joining me now. Natalie is a former student at Trinity College and now works in the West End in education and gigging, and we're going to have a little chat about what it's like working in those different arenas and how the MU can help. So Nat, why don't you tell us what it's like, a week in the life of Natalie Witts?
The majority of my week is taken up by teaching 3 days a week, and I do 8 shows a week, and I also run a business.
Wow, busy. I guess that's what we'd call a portfolio career. So what's the advantage of having a career like that?
It means I can switch things up a little bit. So if I'm teaching and I don't want to go and do a show, I don't have to go and do that. It means that if my show comes off, I can have a bit of a break and can just do more with the business, and I can teach more. And it also means that I can play more and not do as much teaching, so I get that kind of choice, basically.
I guess you get a really good balance of not only in a financial sense, but in a kind of creative sense as well.
Yeah, which is important. You need to have that in your career.
Yeah, and I guess the security is good as well. So if like you say, if one of those avenues kind of dries up for a short period of time, then you've got other things to fill that gap.
Yeah, so if my show comes off, I don't have to worry. I've got my teaching, I've got my business, and it means I can work more on that too, so it's good for everyone. So
when did you join the MU?
When I was about 17, I got asked to do my first function, and they advised me that it might be quite useful to me to be an MU member.
So what would you say are the main benefits for you of being a member of the MU?
I think the main benefits for me are having that support, especially when it comes to contracts. I mean, those things can last for pages and pages, and it's knowing that I can send it over and have it looked at straight away, and knowing that I'm not going to have anything horrible happen to me once I've signed it. I think that happens a lot with education. You know, you're changing contracts, changing employment status.
Yeah, and I guess it's good to have that safety net, isn't it? And also 30,000 friends alongside you, and you know, we have lots of events here at the MU where loads of very diverse people turn up, and creative people, and as is always the case when you put creative people in a room, they bounce ideas off each other, they collaborate with each other, and so it's a good way of meeting people, I guess, as well. Yeah. So what's your involvement with the MU?
I'm on a range of committees.
Yeah, we call you an activist, wouldn't we?
So I'm on 4 or 5 committees.
The Theatre Section Committee, the West End Subcommittee, London Regional Committee, Young Members Subcommittee, and you're a hub rep as well for one of the education hubs. So that's quite busy. I guess it's important to kind of point out to people that activism doesn't necessarily have to be that extensive. People get involved with the MU in various different ways, and a retweet is activism, essentially. So what would you say then are the benefits of being more involved?
It means I get to have a say on my career and my life. I get to, it's not just about turning up. It's not a soft meeting. You don't turn up and you just get told things. You turn up and get asked your opinion about things, and that opinion can change things. I'm going into a UK theatre negotiation soon to negotiate the new contracts for the UK theatre contracts, which involves possibly trying to increase my pay, trying to get more mileage, that directly affects me, and that, it's a lot more than just turning up.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went into a negotiation as a member, as a musician, before I became an official, and the sense of satisfaction I got from saying all the things that I've been saying in committees and to officials in front of the person that was representing the other side. So, to say, well, this is a problem for us and this is a problem for us, and actually to hear the answers back as to why it's a problem for them to do anything about it, and then trying to figure out a path through that as well. So yeah, it kind of gives you that sense of control almost, doesn't it, when essentially all the rates that a lot of the rates that you're working under are negotiated by the MU. I think that's something that people aren't necessarily that aware of all the time. Is you go into a theatre or you go into an orchestra or a recording studio. It's important not to forget that the fees that you're getting paid have been negotiated before you went in there by the MU. I think something, especially, it wasn't on my radar when I left college, that was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think all of the work I do, bar my own business, is, well, actually, no, that's not true. My business also, it's all MU negotiated somehow, you know.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. So perhaps it's useful for us to talk about the structure internally. So you're on the committees, you're kind of on the policy unit, as you said. You go and you come into meetings here and you're asked your advice on stuff. And I think it's worth pointing out that I'm kind of now on the other side of that. So in effect, I've gone from being a politician to being a civil servant. So I don't play anymore, but I undertake all the work that those committees set me. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
One of the great benefits, I think, of the MU is that it can be anonymous. So if you're on a gig and something goes wrong, then you know, if that gets back to us, we have roving stewards as well who kind of dip in and out of different aspects of the business and feed information back to us. And if there is a problem, we would never go steaming in and say this member's contacted us. We can do that anonymously, so it does give that added protection. Yeah. And I guess as well that you get respect from your colleagues for putting your head above the parapet and going, you know, I'm negotiating your terms and conditions and I'm doing the best I can, and presumably that gives you respect from colleagues. Yeah, and also you are always protected by the MU. I mean, I've had issues where I've had to bring things up, and from a hub rep kind of viewpoint in a pit, you know, so I guess a roving steward kind of job, and I've always had protection from them. You know, you get the guidance of how to do it, but it's important also that the management know that you can raise issues and you've got the union on your side, and as soon as they know that the union are involved, often they're more agreeable. Yeah, so exactly what you said, that you know, you could be working in a school and you could be self-employed, you could be employed, and if the school turned around to you and said don't come back in September, then where you lie within that spectrum of employment status depends what rights you have ultimately, and as to whether we can fight that on your behalf. So I mean, our mantra has always been get it in writing, you know, get everything that you can in writing. And know what you're going into. I think a lot of musicians go into different situations perhaps not being totally clued up about whether they've got copyright protection, whether they've got employment law protection, what the constituent parts of a contract are that need to be fulfilled in order for it to be a binding agreement, to be enforceable if a gig gets cancelled. You know, if they don't get paid for a gig, how do we enforce that? And so really the message, I guess, is help us to help you, because we can't always undertake those battles on your behalf if we don't have the paperwork to back it up. So a lot of people think that contracts have to be these kind of verbose documents, but ultimately they only have to contain 4 constituent parts, which is an offer, an acceptance, something of value has to change hands, and an intent to enter into a legal relationship. So as long as it fulfills all those criteria, so you know, confirmation of time, place, the fee, all those kinds of things, the address of the person that's booking you, then it's enforceable. A lot of people come to us and they don't have that paper trail to back it up, and verbal agreements are very, very difficult to enforce. One way that you can even create a paper trail, having had a telephone conversation, which I do sometimes, is following a telephone conversation, I'll email the person and say, this is my understanding of our conversation, could you let me know if your understanding is any different to that? Even that is better than kind of just relying on, oh, I had this phone call, and is that enforceable? Because essentially it's not really. I think it's really important to remind people that you've worked your whole life up to now preparing for this product that you are going to give to somebody, whether it's visually or orally, and to just do that without any kind of I don't know, security that it's not going to be abused. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take a bottle of Coke out of a shop and go, don't worry, I'll get back to you, I'll pay you later. Or you just, you know, you've been working to that since you were, you know, 8, 9 years old. You can't give it away. No, absolutely, and I think that's a really good point, because I mean we'll probably come on to negotiating later, but you know, when we're negotiating fees, essentially you're negotiating something that's entirely market driven. So it's how much someone is willing to pay for the product that you're delivering. So yeah, it's very much based on your self-worth. And if you collectively have a strong self-worth and say, well, actually, our product is very good here and you're exploiting us, then that puts us in a strong position as negotiators. If people are kind of prepared to undercut all the time, then not only does that impact the longevity of their own career, but also the music business as a whole.
So what is your average week in the MU?
I guess it's equally as varied as yours, really. We could be looking at a music teacher who has had a problem at their school. As an employed person, you have a statutory right to be accompanied by a trade union official at disciplinary and grievance meetings. So that's one use of being a member of a trade union. But yeah, so it could be a problem with someone's employment. It could be someone's not been paid for a gig that they've done, or the gig's been cancelled. We can write on their behalf, and if necessary pursue that through small claims court, county court. It could be having a contract checked, so somebody could be presented with a contract and they don't know whether to sign it, so we can have that checked by one of our solicitors to see if there are any clauses in there that they need to be aware of. Negotiation is a kind of it happens every day, I guess for all of us really, but certainly for me, negotiating with employers. And that's kind of the part of the job which is really interesting. And I think the part that I find most interesting, when most people start in negotiation, they feel quite threatened by the other side. And I think the important thing to remember is that people aren't necessarily against you, they're just for themselves. So it's all about kind of create a bigger pot of stuff, and then trying to get more for yourself out of that extra value that you've created, and that's certainly something that I try and do, is win-win negotiating. Essentially, negotiating, we all do it in everyday life, don't we? You know, if you were going to be buying a car, then, and you were never going to see the car dealer again, then you try and get strike a much better deal than, go pretty hard line with that negotiation. Whereas if, you wanted to buy a new car every 2 years, which with our collective bargaining, we want to preserve those relationships so that the end game is better further down the line. So it's about kind of knowing the type of negotiation that you're in, and the best strategy to work in that negotiation.
So what do you think the other benefits are for members?
Well, weekly we're dealing with all different aspects, so I guess a selection of these are beneficial. There's, as you said, the contract advisory service, so if you get a contract sent to you and you want that check-in by a solicitor, we can have that done for you. You get that back in terms of employment law protection. If you've got an employment contract, we can have that checked for you, or if you encounter a problem in an employed situation, as a trade union official, I've got a statutory right to accompany a member to a disciplinary grievance meeting. Cancellations and unpaid fees, if you do a gig and you don't get paid for it, or if the gig's cancelled before you even get there, then if you've got a paper trail to back that up and an MU contract, which are available on the website, then if there's sufficient contractual paperwork there, then we can pursue that if that fee's not forthcoming from the engager. We negotiate on a day-to-day basis, so if you need negotiation advice, that's something that we can help with. We can often find levers in most situations to help kind of increase fees for members when they're negotiating terms and conditions perhaps above what our baseline is, or they're undertaking some work that isn't covered by one of our collective bargaining agreements. We can help with copyright. So if you are doing a recording, you're in a recording studio, recording for someone else's album or your own, we can help with the legal side of that and the copyright protection. Other benefits, public liability insurance. So if there's something happens whilst you're at work, then you're potentially covered up to a value, I think, of £10 million at the moment. So that's a good benefit there. There's instrument insurance. And that covers equipment, associated musical equipment as well. There's accident cover, I'm reading them because there are so many, professional expenses insurance, professional indemnity insurance. So there's quite a big safety net there of different benefits that members can use. The MU has a pension scheme that's administered by Hensilla Canworth, which is kind of movable, whichever employer you're working for. So if you were working at, you know, in a West End, if you were contracted on a West End show, or if you were working at the Royal Shakespeare Company or the National Theatre or whatever area it is, then the employer can pay into that pension. It's all one pot, which is quite useful as well. Mm. So what would you say is your one piece of advice for students leaving music college?
To brace yourself and to make sure you know what you're worth, I think, is my advice, because that's really important. And make sure you know where you want to be going. That can change, but don't lose sight of what you want to be doing, because if you're not enjoying something, you won't have a nice time doing it. And that's not what life's about. You want to play music to enjoy it, to make money, obviously, because you've got to pay bills, but also make sure that your quality of life is the way you want it to be, I think.
Yeah.
So what are your 3 tips for working in the music industry?
I'd say the first one is get it in writing. We're kind of limited on what we can do if there's no paper trail. So, you know, you might have been booked for something on the phone, but I'd say get it in writing and know what you're signing up for. Secondly, tying in with that really is I'd say know your rights. When you go into a situation, know what your employment rights are. And know if you've got copyright protection, know those kind of ins and outs of the environment that you're going into. And thirdly, I'd say join the MU.